Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Coming up later in the show, we'll explore Gooseberry Falls in Minnesota. But first, Matt O'Lean talks with an author about a new book about beer of North Dakota.
And my guest is Alicia Underly Nelson. Her new book is a great read for people around here, North Dakota Beer, A Heady History. Welcome to Prairie Pulse.
Thanks for having me.
First off, just tell folks a bit about yourself, what you do, your background, where you're from originally.
Sure. I'm from Hendron, Minnesota originally, so a little Red River Valley town on the Minnesota side. And I've been here in Fargo since 2002. Moved back, started working in a downtown bar, and kind of learned about beer organically, working my way up. I started as a bar back and a cocktail waitress, and kind of explored it from the practical side. After college at MSUM, I went into writing and advertising and started writing again full-time about 5 years ago. And I really specialize in writing about this part of the world. So what's unique and interesting in the upper Midwest and the prairie provinces of Canada, just because that's not a story that we get out to the nation and the international media quite as often as I think we should. I think there's really great stories here. So I really love to specialize in what's unique about this part of the world, because every time I go to conferences and meet writers from around the world, they're always really interested in what's going on in North Dakota, just because it's a place they haven't heard a lot about. And good writers and great photographers, they really want to go and explore stories that haven't been told. So I kind of think it's my duty to tell those stories. And with this book, I had an opportunity not just to talk about what's happening in the present, but to go back into the past, which was really a fun project for me.
So lots of research, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Why did you write this book, and tell us what it's about?
Well, it's about what we were drinking, when, where, and why in this part of the world since pretty much the moment that frontier soldiers arrived on the scene in the late 1850s and early 1860s. So it's really about the evolution of beer and about how white settlement and the transportation networks that were put in place moved that beer from east to west, and how tastes change, and how the people that immigrated here really changed the beer that was consumed and made. And it's been a really interesting story for me to research personally, just because when I went into it, I was actually pitching another book on North Dakota travel, and I thought that would be the one that got the deal first. That would be the one that I would write first. And I have done a lot of photography for beer. I worked with the tourism folks for North Dakota Tourism to do some brochures. I love craft beer, and I've been following that story since Fargo Brewing Company came to town, the first one here in Fargo-Moorhead. And so that was something that I've really dived into from the beginning. And when they said, we actually are looking for somebody to perhaps throw their hat in the ring and try a proposal for this story, I said, you know what, this will be great, great opportunity for me to practice. I can learn about pitching. And the second that I turned in that book pitch, I thought, I really want this story now. I was sort of neutral about it at the beginning, but the second that I really dove into the research and realized that there was so much that hadn't been covered. Usually, when you dive into a story, you have 5, 6, 7 really great sources, and then you think, how can I add to this story? How can I build on what's already here? In the case of North Dakota Beer, there really wasn't a lot that was published. There were a few museum exhibits and a few very rough documents that were on record, but really no books, very few magazine articles, so just a really fun challenge for a journalist to dive into, and it was a trip, to say the least. I would tell anybody that's pitching a book, give yourself about 3 times more research time than you think that you need, because I had friends that told me that, and I thought, I'll be on the safe side. I'll double it. That should give me plenty of time and a little cushion, and thankfully, I do freelance full-time, so I have a certain amount of flexibility in my schedule. I was basically able to clear 6 months and work on nothing but this project, so I needed every minute.
So beer first arrives in Dakota Territory with the settlers, the soldiers. Kind of tell us how it started and how it spread.
Yep, absolutely. Alcohol in general is a product of white settlement. There was no history of alcohol use here on the plains with the people that are indigenous to this area. Only a few tribes in the whole of North America have any history with alcohol use at all, and that was always for ceremonial usage, never for casual consumption. So when first contact happened, the fur traders came through. They brought whiskey, but beer was really arrived with the frontier soldiers that came and began settling those forts that were going to watch over the ox cart trails and the stagecoach and the riverboat routes. It was all about protecting transportation and all about sort of guiding and protecting settlers as settlement moved west. So the first forts popped up. Fort Abercrombie had a brewery down by Wahpeton. That was the first permanent military fort in this area, the land that would become North Dakota. Fort Totten near Devil's Lake actually has our first beer review on record.
Okay.
So those were the first places that beer popped up, and that was usually created right there on the site. Wasn't always, it was kind of questionable quality because the people that brewed it usually were the folks that were the traders in the forts. So they may have had experience brewing, they may not have, but it was a pretty smart beverage for them to have because they brewed ale, so it didn't need very much preparation time. They didn't have to do anything terribly special to store it. It didn't need to age for a long period of time, so they could make it. They could brew about every week, turn it out, and of course, when you have young guys, many of whom are away from home and have a little money in their pocket for the first time ever, and these are fairly remote areas even now, but then, I mean, it was basically the end of the earth. It was the end of, you know, the so-called civilized world for these folks. So they were out on the edges of civilization, not a lot to do, not a lot of outlets for their energy, and not a lot of places to spend their money. So they drank a lot of beer. And I always tell people, when you read a soldier's diary saying, oh, we had a few bottles of beer, those bottles were quart bottles. They're about twice the size of an average beer that we're drinking today. So if a young guy says, oh yeah, we went out, it wasn't too bad, we had 6, 7 beers. Well, they had a lot more than that. That would be the equivalent of drinking about a dozen today. So they definitely kind of started the trend of heavy drinking that has been a legacy of this part of the world since then. And that's been something that, there's been a lot of tension around that from the very beginning. And that's the story that runs, I mean, from the very first moment that beer was made, even up until today.
And then that temperance movement starts to hit nationwide, right? Late 1800s, early 1900s. Do I have my dates right there?
Yep.
How does that impact North Dakota?
Well, North Dakota, as a Minnesota resident, I hadn't realized that we had such an incredible history with temperance here in North Dakota. And I think a huge part of that was because we had a lot of differing tensions. You had this young workforce, and they were very similar to those frontier soldiers in so many ways. They were young, they were mostly single, they had a lot of money, and they weren't going to be staying here for a long time, so they didn't put down roots necessarily. So they could get a little wild and crazy, and there really weren't a lot of consequences for them. And then you had this other group of people who were coming out with families, or they were here to build a business, build their fortune. They were going to stay here for generations. That was a very different focus. And when the frontier soldiers sort of stabilized, that population stabilized, the railroads came through. So we needed people to build the railroads. We needed people to work on the farms and harvest the wheat that basically made the Red River Valley such a popular draw for white settlement in the early days after the Homestead Act. And those were the same kind of populations. They were here maybe for a season, maybe for a year. They got paid every week, sometimes every month. They had a lot of money to burn and a lot of energy. And some of the very first businesses to pop up were saloons. Well, if you were here to make a quick buck and you were here to have a great time, this was a great deal because those were open 24/7. You could do whatever you wanted. It was really a Wild West atmosphere all through the 1870s and 80s. And from the second that the railroad pushed through into Dakota Territory in 1872, everywhere that railroad went, there'd be bars, there'd be new workforce that would come, and there would be that almost immediate tension. Because if you were able to live far enough away, maybe you're a founding father of Grand Forks or a founding father of Fargo, your home and your business perhaps are going to be several blocks away in the comfortable side of town, away from those really unruly downtown districts where the party's happening 24/7. But the people that maybe didn't have as much money to build as far out, they have to deal with this. Their kids have to see this on their way to school. They have to walk past this on the way to church. And communities in those neighborhoods and rural communities where a lot of the burden fell upon the mothers and the sisters and the wives of the folks that were spending time in the bar, this was a problem they couldn't ignore. And it was really the clergy, it was really women, and it was really rural folks and a lot of Scandinavian people who were both in rural areas and in some of the more populated neighborhoods that were close to these saloon districts that pushed very, very, very hard for temperance. And then you had folks on the other side that came from the Germans from Russia, folks from Germany, folks from what's now the Czech Republic, that did not share that attitude at all.
Right.
They were not the heavy drinkers like these young guys that came into town to spend their money, but they found beer to be a really important part of their culture. This was something that, like many of the folks in colonial North America, they'd grown up brewing beer. It had been something that was handed down for generations. You learned how to make bread, you learned how to brew beer, it was all the same. Women did it a lot of the time. Men, women, children drank it, the elderly drank it. It was often safer than water. So this was a very, very different way of using alcohol. And they said, we don't have anything in common with these folks in the saloons, so we don't need to be worried at all. And when North Dakota was set to become a state, the temperance advocates had done a really great job of kind of approaching this issue county by county and whittling down that support and finding a great way to isolate and organize people at a grassroots level. And so it really is telling that a lot of people were shocked that when North Dakota was set to become a state, that first the temperance line even was included, and that a lot of people didn't really even seem to notice it. And when it ended up passing,
So
people were
it's a
stunned.
dry state when it becomes a statehood.
Yep.
People don't know that, do they?
We entered the Union in 1889 as a dry state, and it seems, as you read the historical record, that even the folks that were fighting for Prohibition seemed shocked. One of my favorite stories is there was a big parade in Jamestown scheduled. That was one of the hotbeds of anti-alcohol sentiment, and they quietly canceled that parade, even in an area that had a lot of support, because it barely passed. I mean, just over 1,100 people passed that, and that made for a lot of tension between people that saw alcohol as part of their culture and kind of part of their birthright, and people that thought, good, now finally we can build the society that we want. And unfortunately for the people that supported temperance, North Dakotans did not necessarily respond with the enthusiasm that they hoped they would. The parties immediately moved to the border cities, so East Grand Forks,
Sure.
Moorhead, even some communities along the Montana border, immediately saw action. In some cases, ingenious drinkers even built entire cities to cater to the alcohol needs of the population. And so they really did not adapt to temperance well at all.
So when is North Dakota a wet state at all, anywhere between statehood and Prohibition?
Nope, we
No,
were a
it's
dry
all
state
dry, all
from
that. That's
from
amazing.
1890. There was
Wow.
a 6-month period where the breweries could figure out what on earth they were going to do, which was a huge challenge because you had really thriving industries now that had been established, and they were shipping beer in each direction on the railroad for hundreds and hundreds of miles, and suddenly they're told by the lawmakers, oh no, you have to disband and you can't produce any longer. Well, they fought it really hard. And only one of them moved across the border to Minnesota. There was a brewer up in Grand Forks that shifted to East Grand Forks. Everybody else was run out of business. So it was a huge challenge in those 6 months. And basically, people bought a lot of beer in the interim. They had a good time. They stockpiled what they could. And you see communities on the border just immediately responding to that need for alcohol that people had.
Can you read a portion of the book?
I would love to. Would you like to read about the first
Yes.
beer review on
Yes,
history?
that'd be great.
Here's the first beer review on record in North Dakota. North Dakota's first beer review on record comes to us from Fort Totten, a frontier fort tasked with monitoring the mail and supply routes between Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Montana. This rural outpost was located in the north-central part of Dakota Territory, near what is now Devil's Lake. On New Year's Eve, 1868, Assistant Surgeon J.N.T. King took a sip of common ale from the small brewery overseen by the fort sutler Ernest Brenner. King was not impressed. "It is a miserable article and not fit to drink. There is little taste of beer, hops, or malt about it," King wrote in his diary. Either Brenner, a German immigrant, didn't inherit his countrymen's knack for brewing — in all fairness, he immigrated to Boston as a kid — or he made a mistake during the brewing process. Or maybe King was the territory's first beer snob.
Wow, that's great. Now, we don't have time to get to everything in this book with the time that we have here, but basically after Prohibition, what's the beer history like in North Dakota? And then, of course, now we have the craft brewing that's going bonkers here.
Absolutely. Well, it really breaks down. The pre-statehood was kind of the first big beer boom in North Dakota.
Right.
And we really didn't have a second one until the 90s. But what happened in between was North Dakota barley really took off. Now,
Right, with the farmers, right.
absolutely. Like, obviously, this is a great agricultural state, and malting barley is a key ingredient for beer, which grows really well here. So from the time we started keeping track of which state was producing the most malting barley, North Dakota's been in the top 3 consistently from the time we started keeping records. So almost all the barley that was produced in the state would go to the large macro breweries that emerged from Prohibition. These were the folks that either were able to transition and keep themselves afloat by brewing other products like soda or root beer, or transitioning into ceramics or other goods that they could kind of ride out Prohibition, or small family businesses that were kind of able to keep themselves small enough and multitask in the interim. And so they emerged, and it really was, instead of all these different local breweries like we had in the 1890s, the 1900s, we really ended up with just a handful of brewers making beer. But luckily for North Dakota farmers, they all had contracts with these brewers. So we have people that have been brewing or growing malting barley for generations, 4, 5 generations. And all of the malting barley plants that are the largest in the world are actually within a 4-hour drive of Fargo, North Dakota. So this has been just a huge source for that industry for years. We did have one attempt at a local brewery in Bismarck. It did not last, and it's really a shame because they had a great lineup. They had farmers and bar owners that bought stock in the product. They had a talented brewmaster, but they made one very small little technical mistake that is actually something that you don't even need an engineer to catch. A janitor probably would have been able to catch it. But they had one little mistake, and that really, I think, left a bad taste, literally, in the mouths of beer drinkers in North Dakota.
What was the mistake?
He neglected to install a filter. The brewer hadn't brewed with North Dakota water before, and water is obviously a really key feature in beer. And he assumed that one of the chemicals would burn off in the brewing process. And usually it would, but the chemical makeup was just different enough that it didn't. So it passed the first test. When they shipped it out of the brewery, they said, great, looks good. They bottled it, and they sent it all out for the test launch. And when people opened their bottles and cans, it had already started to go bad. And unfortunately, that particular chemical, if it progresses long enough and grows, it sets off a reaction that can mimic the effects of food poisoning. Okay. So people had those beers, and they immediately had to make a run for the bathroom, and that did not go as planned. Everybody was talking about the beer, but not at all for the reasons that the brewers hoped they'd be talking about it. And they remedied the problem immediately and fixed it and made some great beer, but people really remembered that. Yeah. And it struggled, and it was really, I talked to people that drank that beer, I've talked to people whose families had invested in that beer, and that kind of chilled brewing until the brew pub revolution in the 80s and 90s, when home brewing technically was illegal up until 1979. And there'd been a lot of people in North Dakota especially that had been doing that even when they technically weren't supposed to. I learned in the research that laws do not stop North Dakotans from doing anything that they wanted to do.
North Dakotans like to drink beer.
They do,
good, and
they like to make it.
Good and bad effects, of course, as we know, which we don't have time to get into. About 30 seconds left. Sure. Where can people get the book if they want to buy this, purchase it? Where are some outlets they can find it?
Perfect. It's available on my website, prairiestylefile.com. Okay. You can also find it at independent bookstores all over North Dakota, and it's available at some of the major retailers like Amazon and Barnes & Noble as well.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Alicia.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The book is North Dakota Beer, A Heady History. Alicia Underlee Nelson from Fargo is the author, and it's a great read. I urge you to pick that up. Stay tuned for more.
On the banks of Lake Superior, the Civilian Conservation Corps left an incredible legacy in Gooseberry Falls State Park. The beautifully crafted stone buildings they built at the height of the Depression stand as a testament to the hard work and can-do spirit of a corps of young men who enhance the natural beauty of one of Minnesota's most popular state parks.
It's a great place to come in the summer and enjoy being by the lake. In the winter, we have over 17 miles of ski trails and snowshoe areas. And then in the fall, you can come and see the colors. The beginning of the land, about 600 acres, was purchased in 1933 by the state, and in May of 1934, the first CC arrivals came. And that first camp was located down here by the mouth of the river, and that fall, the first members of Camp 2710 arrived, and that was kind of the beginning of the park. They started making trails. Some of the buildings, including the one behind me, started being built, and Gooseberry has just continued on since then. It became a park in 1937, and today we have over 500,000 visitors who come throughout the year to visit us. I think life for the CCC boys was really good here. You know, they came, they felt they had a job, they were learning new skills, they were supporting their family, and it really was a community. It's interesting to think about what it would have been like for them and how close that these guys got to one another. We have over 80 structures here. So we have a lot of different kind of lookout areas, lots of stone switchbacks and stairways. And one of the biggest structures that they did was what we call the castle in the park, or the Gateway Plaza. And that's where, when visitors came, they could park at the top of that, come down to view the falls, and there are restrooms there. And that they started building in 1936. It was the longest running project that they did. A lot of these boys that came, they were farm boys or town boys, and they didn't know the skills of masonry and logging and putting, carpentry, putting things together. They had local men, they were called LEMs. They were men from the community that had the skills, and they would train these new CCC enrollees how to do everything. And there's even a quote from one of our enrollees who said, "Without these men, we would have been completely lost." One big project that they did was working on the picnic flow. And the picnic flow is this big, ancient lava flow of just basalt rock, but very beautiful, very scenic, right along the lake, and you get a good view. They built over 30 picnic tables, benches, grills, and water fountains. All of our stone stairways were CCC built. There's a water tower that exists here that they built, a couple of pump houses, their ice house, there are these little scattered remnants of everything they did and of their life here too. Winter on the North Shore is just something everybody should experience. The water itself, the lake, kind of takes on this new life formation. The waterfalls usually freeze mostly, and we'll get some really unique ice structures. And then we have ski trails, groom ski trails, snowshoe trails that are really fun to get out on, and we do a lot of winter programming as well. The neat thing about visiting any park on the North Shore and Gooseberry, I always tell people, whether you come here and it's a rainy day and there's a big storm or something, Lake Superior always has something to show off, whether it's great big waves or just this large glass, body of water. We're also very privileged that we have 5 naturalists during the summer season, so we're able to offer a variety of programs, from guided hikes to guided accessible strolls on paved trails to campfire and evening programs. We're able to do a lot and do a lot for everybody and continue to do programming throughout the winter. Gooseberry has a really unique geological story. It goes back from millions of years ago when the continental rift was created, and throughout this whole area, lava kind of spewed out and cooled, creating these big kind of rocky basalt beaches that we have. That's pretty unique for this area and for Lake Superior. And we also have not only 1, but 5 waterfalls. So people can come and explore the 2 lower falls, the middle falls, the upper falls, and hike inland up about a mile to the 5th falls. We also have different trails that expand north, where you can kind of get up over the ridge and start seeing some unique forest plants and some different maples and different types of tree species as well. So, Gooseberry offers a lot, whether you just want to enjoy being by the big water or you want to go and explore the woods as well. people who served in the CCC, when they were getting ready to close up camp and a lot of the enrollees were leaving the camp, one of the guys wrote, "The thousands of people who will use this area in time to come may give us little praise for our efforts, but will little matter as long as we can justly be proud of saying, I helped make this park what it is today." Little did he know it wouldn't be thousands of visitors, it would be millions of people coming to this park. And you know, we have a CCC statue here. We do a lot of CCC hikes. We give them praise and we remember and tell their stories and how much their story is still alive today.
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse for this week. But as always, thanks for watching.
Funding for Minnesota Legacy programs are provided by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, and by the members of Prairie Public.